Hannukah! It's a time of war, baby. But a fun war. I've been saying the same thing for 20 years. Burning a little sage this morning for our morning blessings. I've got my hemp bowl right here. I'm going to put the sage down in the hemp. But, you can use any sweet smelling herb when you do your prayers. The reason I'm talking about war, because this holiday, happy Hanukkah everybody, is all about war. The Greeks, Alexander the Great, as predicted in the book of Daniel, took over the entire world with incredible speed. And what did he do when he took over the world? He respected people's cultures, but he stamped the Greek culture in the middle of all these places. He put a library, a business, government business building, and you still see that same formula that Alexander the Greek created today. The Romans really admired the Greeks. They were like, oh my God, the Greeks are so cool. So even though they had Latin names, they always added on some Greek. It's like Maximus, They threw on the us because it's kind of Greek. Biggest dickus. Maximus Aurelius. They wanted to sound Greek because the Greeks were the pinnacle of culture, of civilization. Especially these people knew Alexander the Great. He was only like 300 years old when the first Caesars took over the country. My friend Killian is calling. Killian, I'm doing a podcast right now. What's going on?
Oh, well, how's the podcast going? I can call you back if you need.
Yeah, please do. Can you just send me a text if any information?
Got the information over to where it's at. It's in your email, buddy, or I'll talk to you later.
Thank you so much. Bye. Okay, sorry guys. I'm trying to do business and do God's business at the same time. Probably not the best. We're trying to put together a hemp deal, yay! And that's what Temple 420 is all about, creating jobs and creating warriors, young men who will fight for what's right and maybe want to be in the hemp business, because I think marijuana is the plant for the healing of all nations, and that is why I'm Temple 420. That's why I've worked to end the prohibition of cannabis, because it's a God-given plant. And now is the first day of Hanukkah. We were talking about the wars, and you're always at war, okay? And that's why men need to be warriors, need to be tough, need to be strong. And that's why many times this year I've compared two particular men, Andrew Tate and Ben Shapiro. Now, both of them are spiritually blind. Andrew Tate, a warrior, a manly man, a person who says what's on his mind. He don't give a shit if he's canceled. He doesn't care about money. He loves money. He's got his money, but he's not so in love with money that he's going to lower his integrity, his standards, or stop speaking the truth for money. Where he's wrong spiritually is becoming a Muslim. Fucking brainless. Ben Shapiro, on the other hand, wise Jewish, but he's a wimpy little dude. Andrew Tate could kick his ass in 1 minute. Ben Shapiro couldn't defend himself physically against an Andrew Tate in a million years. The only thing that would make them equal would be a weapon, a gun. Now, Ben Shapiro is all for guns. He's got some intelligent ideas, but he doesn't seem like a guy who really knows how to use one. Maybe he's like a little IDF guy, and that means Israeli Defense Force, and he goes out and trains with weapons. I don't know. Where I think Ben is spiritually blind, he's Jewish, so he has the right God at least, but he's never probably cracked open the New Testament, which is a book all about Jews, by Jews, and for Jews, because Jesus only came to his own people. It was Paul, the Jew of Jews, who then took this message of the Messiah to the Gentile nations, because he said, wow, this is a message for the world. And this needs to get out there, and the message has, and it is taught pretty much in every single country, including China, communist China, where it's quasi-illegal. I met and knew all sorts of teachers. Now, I've alluded to this before, I think a couple episodes, that we choose what's going on. And you got to choose whether you're going to send your kids to these schools where these libs of TikTok are being exposed as real pedophiles and pushing their groomer agenda. I'm probably going to get banned just for even saying that shit. Onto children. And that's what's going on here in the United States. And in China, we American English teachers were specifically hired by Chinese parents. They wanted Americans. Oh, we want the right accent. We want to know a little bit about the culture. But there was a few of us, like libs of TikTok, that really felt like we should spread our beliefs onto the children. And we would talk about when it was appropriate in class, like whenever it slightly became appropriate, we would talk about Yeshua the Messiah, Jesus Christ. We would talk about free speech, the Second Amendment, the right to really have freedom of religion and speak out against your country, and how that created. They were like, oh, well, there's negative sides. We'd say, yeah, of course there's some negative sides to that, but the positive sides so outweigh the negative. And even though we weren't converting these kids into capitalist, American, gun-toting people, we planted seeds in their head. The same way the transgender, LGBTQ, rainbow plus, I hate even calling him rainbow, because the rainbow is the sign of Noah, of God's sign that he won't flood the earth again, but he's going to destroy it with fire. So... And it's interesting because the Native Americans have the same prophecy about the world being destroyed in the past with flood, and the next time being destroyed with fire. So, who knows what will happen, but it's Hanukkah, and what does Hanukkah mean? Why are we celebrating? They call it the dedication, the dedication of lights, the festival of lights, but in the New Testament, in the book of John, chapter 10, he calls it the Feast of Dedication. And it's the first day of Hanukkah, and we're on our 43rd, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49. So we have 7 days left of Hanukkah and 7 days left of our temple. And I'm freaking out. I don't know why it took me so long. I did not mean to end it in this Hanukkah week. I don't even know if I'll do it every day this week. I might jam a few in one day, because I really love teaching the Bible, and I felt as if my life has been jammed up a bit because I've been attacked by Tim Pool, who had me arrested, and I had to sell my house. I sent my children away because I didn't want to lose my children, and I feel, as a Jewish person, as if I'm living in a pre-World War II situation where the Jews kind of know something bad is happening, and some of them figure it out, and they start to send their kids out of the country, but they still have to make money or want to make money. And so I'm deciding whether to leave this month and give up a big opportunity to make money with my friend that just called, or whether I should go to Los Angeles, visit my family, make a little bit more money, and then go to Mexico to my children. So it's a very tough decision that I'm still praying on. So let's get back into the Bible here and talk about Hanukkah. What the heck is going on with Hanukkah? So Daniel, in his vision, sees the leopard. Leopard are known for their speed. And he's living in Babylon at the time. And Babylon is the center of the world. I think we've discussed this before. The Assyrians from Ashur, they were descendants of the Babylonians. They had Nineveh. They were some of the cruelest, meanest people in the history of empires. But man, they built an empire. And they even conquered Babylon. Well, finally, Sennacherib comes to conquer Jerusalem. And King Hezekiah doesn't give in to the demands and says, well, God's going to protect us. And he prays and prays, and an angel comes and kills 108, I think it's the angel Michael, killed 185,000 men in one night. I don't know how. But they wake up and they decide, shit, this God is real. We are not messing with these people. And they leave Jerusalem alone. They go back to their country after that. If you lose 185,000 men in one night, that's more than a stadium full. You're like, okay, I'm not sure I want to mess with these people, this God, whatever it is. So they leave, and a couple hundred years later, Nebuchadnezzar comes back. And he eventually takes Daniel as a young child to Babylon, where the Babylonians now have their empire from their own major city, and it's supposedly the most beautiful city in the world. And there's glimpses of it in museums today, and even though it's a couple thousand years old, more, 2,500, 2,700 years old, so it's like fabulous even to this day. Some of the gates and bricks and colors, and it's interesting how times change and empires change. So Daniel is in Babylon, and he is a visionary. He sticks to God. He prays daily. He follows the Jewish law, even though he's in a foreign country. And sometimes that leads to his peril, but he's very well respected as an intellectual person. He comes from high-class lineage, and he's just blessed by God with vision, with life, a long life, a healthy life, and he sees the Babylonians come and take his people away, and he lives to see the Persians conquer Babylon. And it was because the Babylonians were partying with the temple goods, or they happened to be, whatever, that they were disrespecting God. That's the night that Cyrus the Great conquered them. If you hear some popping in the background, it isn't just YouTube making horrible noises or my computer to discourage you from watching a message, but I have a fireplace going on here to keep me warm, and some of the wood had moisture and it's popping. So Daniel sees Alexander the Great coming. Alexander the Great conquers, and one of the things he does is he calls Hellenization, the Greekization. I don't know if that's proper grammar, but he turns everyone, the whole world, into speaking Greek, almost how when the American Revolution happened, the diplomatic language, the upper class spoke French. Greek was the common language at the time. And when Alexander the Great was finally murdered because he didn't take a Greek wife, and he started to adopt some of these Persian customs, and the Greeks didn't like it. His generals didn't like it, so they killed him. He was a young guy. He was drunk. He was a partier. And he was murdered by his 4 generals. And instead of them getting along, they divided his kingdom into 4 parts between the 4 generals. And they ended up fighting each other. Their descendants did. But that's how the Greeks ended up ruling Egypt at the time of the Romans. So Cleopatra and her brother were Greeks. They were Ptolemies, and Ptolemy was a general of Alexander the Great. And Antiochus, well, the Seleucid, I think the guy's name was Seleucid or Succules or whatever, but they called it the Seleucid Empire. They're the ones that ended up with the area of like Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Jordan, and that region. So they were the ones who were ruling Jerusalem for 100 years or so after Alexander died, 100 plus years. And at some point, a guy named Antiochus, I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce this Greek name, he decides, as many rulers do, that he wants to be a god and worshipped as a god on earth. It's like, I'm a god, I'm your ruler, you'll worship me as a deity. The same thing happened in Babylon before, remember? Everyone had to bow down at a certain time to a statue that was made after Nebuchadnezzar or something, and Daniel wouldn't bow down. And even though Nebuchadnezzar really loved him, he had to throw him in the lion's den because that's what he said the punishment was. And that's where Daniel in the lion's den comes from. Because he threw him in there. I don't know if they fed the lion ahead of time or whatever, but Daniel and the lion spent the night together, and he came out in the morning, and the king was actually happy that Daniel survived. And that was maybe a miracle, but God, he wasn't going to break his faith in God just to survive. He'd like, go ahead, kill me. I trust God, and I'm going to not break God's word. And if I die, I die, but I'm still not breaking God's word. And that's like some real love of God Daniel had, man. And trust. And that's what I think God wants us to do, is really trust him and know that he's always going to be there for us. And I've had miracles happen in my own life, sometimes financial, because we live in such a financial world where I don't have money to pay a bill or pay my guys on a certain day, and then bam, I close a deal that day, make the money, and everything works out. So I've learned to trust and not worry and know that God's always going to be there for me, and he always has, and that's a certain joy. But it's not always easy. Sometimes you doubt, and you have to learn how to doubt the doubt and just be like, no, that's just a doubt. God's going to be there. It's going to happen. And when you have that confidence and that trust and that knowing, then you can really trust someone, and you know they're going to be there. And I say someone because God, even though it's spirit, it is a someone. And Jesus was a real person and is still a real person, a living person at the right hand of God. But we've discussed in previous episodes, the Jewish way to say the end times is Acharit ha-Yamin, the end of the right hand. What the heck? It's just a weird way to say end times. Okay, so now let's get into Hannukah in the Bible. Now, it's at John 10, verse 22, but you know me, I like to read the whole darn thing. And excuse me, I have to put on a second pair of glasses like my bifocals, but here we go. Yes, indeed, I tell you, the person who doesn't enter the sheep pen through the door, but climbs in some other way, is a thief or a robber. But the one who goes in through the gate is the sheep's own shepherd. This is the one the gatekeeper admits, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep, each one by name, and leads them out. After taking out all that are his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they recognize his voice. They never follow a stranger, but will run away from him because strangers' voices are unfamiliar to them. Okay, and that is the difference between sheep and goat. Sheep recognize the shepherd's voice, and goats don't. You just have to herd the goats around and beat their butts. And now, the end times is the time when Jesus said he will separate the sheep from the goat. Okay, and they all make a similar sound, and I've raised them before, and I have little kids, so I've gone down to work in the field, and the sheep and goats were closer to where the children were, up by the house, off to the side because they smell, but up there when the garden was down below the mesa, and this is in Arizona, and I'd hear, Dad, Dad, and I'd go running up, and I'd be like, oh, those darn goats. And then sometimes my kids would wake up, and they'd be standing at the top of the mesa, yelling Dad to me in the garden, and they would say the same thing, Dad, Dad, where are you? And I'd be like, oh, I'm working, I'll come right up and give them a hug. So, it's just funny, the similar sound. Yeshua used this indirect manner of speaking with them, but they didn't understand what he was talking about to them. So Yeshua said to them again, yes, indeed, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All those who have come before me have been thieves and robbers, but the sheep didn't listen to them. I am the gate. If someone enters through me, he will be safe, and he will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come so that they may have life, and life in its fullest measure. Okay, when I keep saying that Tim Pool, who had me arrested for burglary charges, it was very depressing. I lost a lot of weight. I had to sell my house. I sent my children away because they told me they could take my kids. So when I realized, burglary is like being a thief, and I would say, oh man, he arrested me for being a thief in the night, I'm not trying to say like, oh, I'm like Jesus or whatever, but it was the only thing as a pastor that made me feel somewhat like, oh, God calls me a thief in the night. Oh, okay, go ahead, asshole. But I didn't. It was the only thing that gave me any like hope or like, okay, he's calling me like Jesus. I'm a Jesus follower, so you call me whatever you want, biatch. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. A hired hand, since he isn't a shepherd and the sheep aren't his own, sees the wolf coming and abandons the sheep and runs away. The wolf drags them off and scatters them. The hired worker behaves like this because that's all he is, a hired worker. So it doesn't matter to him what happened to the sheep. Okay? And that's what happened to King David. He was his father's shepherd. He was responsible for his father's sheep. And he was attacked by a bear and a lion. And he killed them both with his bare hands. And when he was a teenager. So he must have been a pretty tough, strong guy. But he said he just trusted God. And those were his sheep. And he had to protect them. And that's why God said David was a man after his own heart. Even though he sinned, he repented. Okay. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life on behalf of the sheep. Okay, so now here he is predicting his own crucifixion, his own death. After I have, and I'm using the two glasses to make it easier, other sheep, which are not from this pen, I need to bring them, and they will hear my voice, and they will be one flock, one shepherd. Okay, let's say that one more time. And I lay down my life on behalf of the sheep. Also, I have other sheep which are not from this pen. Okay, other sheep that aren't Jewish. I need to bring them, and they will hear my voice, and they will be one flock, one shepherd. Okay, so now he's talking about Christians. Well, how do Christians and Jews come together? It's Hannukah, baby. Let's keep reading. This is why the Father loves me, because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me. On the contrary, I lay it down of my own free will. I have the power to lay it down, and I have the power to take it up again. This is what my Father commanded me to do. Okay, so he knows what his job is and what his role is, and he's explaining it to the people. But most of them don't understand. Probably not even the disciples, his best friends, his buddies who he's been hanging out with for months now. And they've seen him do stuff. Again, there was a split. Oh, it says that right here. There was a split among the Judeans because of what he said. Many of them said, he has a demon. He's Hannukah. He's not the Messiah. He's the Hannukah. Hannukah is crazy. So, why do you listen to him? Others said, these are not the mans of a man who is demonized. How can a demon open blind people's eyes? Make the deaf hear or the lame walk? Here comes Hannukah. Now, in the Christian Bible, it says the Feast of Dedication. But in this Jewish Bible, it says, then came Hannukah in Jerusalem. It was winter, and Yeshua was walking around inside the temple area in Shlomo's colonnade. Okay, I think it says in Solomon's porch in the Christian temple, in the non-Jewish version of the Bible. And it was the porch. And think of a porch area as like the front porch of your house. It's covered, so you can walk under it, kind of like the veranda. Like when I went to the Capitol on January 6th, we walked under the veranda right in front of the Capitol. It's the porch. And that's where I saw one of the Antifa guys changing clothes so he could be less identified. He had scars and scratches all over him. And that's how I knew this whole January 6th thing was one fake false flag. And hopefully the truth will come out soon, because the truth always does come out. So let's go back. John 10, verse 22. Then came Hannukah in Jerusalem. I don't know why I have to do the old Jewish accent. It was winter, and Yeshua was walking around inside the temple area in Shlomo's colonnade. So the Judeans surrounded him and said to him, how much longer are you going to keep us in suspense? Are you the Messiah, or are you Hannukah? Tell us publicly. Yeshua answered them, I have already told you, and you don't trust me. The words I do in my Father's name testify on my behalf. But the reason you don't trust, we're going back to trust again, is that you are not included among my sheep. Oh man, that's a bust. My sheep listen to my voice. I recognize them, they follow me, and I give them eternal life. They will absolutely never be destroyed, and no one will snatch them from my hands. My Father who gave them to me is greater than all, and no one can snatch them from my Father's hand. I and the Father are one. Okay, so bam! He's basically saying, I'm God, and that's when, exactly, look at what it says next. Once again, the Judeans picked up rocks in order to stone him. Yeshua answered them, You have seen me do many good deeds and reflect the Father's power. For which one of these deeds are you stoning me? The Judeans replied, We are not stoning you, Temple 420, for any of your good deeds, but for blasphemy, because you, who are only a man, are making yourself out to be Elohim, to be God. And Yeshua answered them, Isn't it written in your Torah, I have said, you people are Elohim. Okay, and this is Psalm 82, verse 6. If he, God, called Elohim the people to whom the word of Elohim was addressed, and the Tanakh cannot be broken, that's the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Kitzuvim, then you are telling the one whom the Father set apart as holy and sent to the world, you are committing blasphemy, just because I said, I am a son of Elohim. Okay? And all Jewish people are sons of Elohim. And Moses said, if you keep my commandments, he will be your God, and you will be his people. If I am not doing the deeds that reflect my Father's power, don't trust me. But if I am, then even if you don't trust me, trust the deeds, so that you may understand once and for all that the Father is united with me, and I am united with the Father. One more time they tried to arrest him, but he slipped out of their hands, because God will protect you. He went off beyond the Jordan, where Jonathan, had been immersing, baptizing at first, and stayed there. Many people came to him. Yohanan performed no miracles, but everything Yohanan said about this man was true, and many people put their trust in him. So John was a respected prophet, and even in his day, which is very uncommon, and he ended up getting murdered over like some chick at a wedding, like danced for him to keep me a promise. What do you want? I want John's head. And he was like, oh crap, I don't want to kill John's head, but he gave his word in front of all these people, so he had to go kill Jesus' cousin John. And John, believe me, was like, what the hell? Like, he knew Jesus was the Messiah, he knew this was the right thing, and he was like, why am I getting killed? But it happened. And maybe it happened so that Jesus could grow, because John was like a very, very famous prophet. People knew he was his cousin and everything else. So now let's talk about Hannukah. What the heck is Hannukah? Thanks for sticking around this long. So Hannukah, this guy Antiochus, however you say his name, he says, I'm God, you have to worship me. And he set up idols inside the temple because he ruled the country. The Greeks ruled it, so they ruled the temple. So he says, well, now that I'm God, you're going to worship me as God. And the people were like, oh, no, that ain't going to happen. Because one of the things that Alexander did is he let the people keep their own faith, their own religion, their own culture. They learned Greek, and they kept their own thing. So it was kind of like a multicultural society. And eventually that won't last. So, because a house divided cannot stand. Anyway, we're running out of time. I think I'm going to do chapter 2 right now, because this is some really interesting stuff. Antiochus called himself Epiphanes, which means like God on earth or something. And the people called him Epimanes, which instead of Epiphanes, instead of God, they called him crazy, which is the same thing with Jua. Instead of with Jesus, Yeshua, instead of calling him Messiah, they called him Meshuggah. In this chapter, like, what are you, Meshuggah? And he's like, are you or you not the Messiah? And he said, I showed you. You know, you didn't listen. And then they go, you're a Meshuggah then, not Messiah, Meshuggah. And they go, you're not Epiphanes, you're Epimanes, or however you say crazy in Greek, because the people spoke that language too. So be warriors, don't be wimps, but learn from both of these wrong men. Andrew Tate, who's a strong, manly man warrior, and Ben Shapiro, who's a wimpy Jewish dude who probably has never cracked open the New Testament. And that's the whole thing about being Jewish. They really don't want you to know anything about Jesus, because if we realized he was Jewish, all the writers of the New Testament were Jewish, more Jewish people would become messianic believers, and that is the resurrection of the dried bones that Ezekiel spoke of. Amen.